Good evening. My name is David Okun. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to speak to you today. Again, I'm speaking to you in relation to the cost of living crisis. Probably I say good afternoon, but it's good morning. Good morning on Friday, on Thursday morning. It's actually Thursday. And Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We come a long way, 1 year now into this project. I've been talking about the cost of living for 1 year, the lifetime of this project, which began on the 4th of December 2022. Last year, this channel has existed since 2012. But the channel has been dormant for 10 years. So it goes to show, for especially for new subscribers, I mean for new YouTubers, but also for those who are interested in YouTubing, who are actually seasoned YouTubers who have grown as a channel. It goes to show why it is extremely important to keep active. Do your best to be active by uploading a video. Do your best. Normally, pick a topic, any topic really you're interested in. If you are passionate about something, try and do that topic for the long term. I mean, because you will run out of ideas. If you care about a topic, maybe equality, social justice, freedom of speech, or you care about welfare, or anything, national security, environment, try and talk about it. It doesn't matter how you talk about it, but do your best. Or just talk about anything if you don't have any fake subject to talk about. I am giving you this advice, or actually making this suggestion. I wouldn't say advice necessarily, because I've actually been doing this for 10 months now, for a year. We are a small channel, we are growing. And thank you so much everyone who have subscribed, who have been supporting me in many ways, giving feedback. Wonderful. We are on our way, and try to post a video every day. The equipment is still lacking considerably. We are slow in terms of equipment. Uploading sometimes takes 1 day, 2 days, because my videos are long. I've decided to do long video because I actually am handling a very complicated topic. The cost of living is extremely complex. I've enjoyed actually the process, and hope you have been also enjoying the process. Going forward, we are talking about the situation, policy, and practices happening in relation to the cost of living crisis in the United Kingdom. Watch this video alongside the rest of the video, help in the UK. That is the topic, the subtopic that you will find this material. Help in the United Kingdom. Yeah, for the cost of living, go to the government website, gov.uk, and also visit big organizations, charities such as Citizen Advice, and also you can go to your local authority website. But what happened in the United Kingdom, as I said in the other videos, happened across the world, in Europe, America, Asia, and Africa. This is because of the system of capitalism and also globalization. As occurs in respective continents and countries across the globe. So it is really useful to pay attention to my topics in in the United Kingdom, as I look at the kind of help available in the United Kingdom to try and address the problem of the cost of living crisis. The cost of living crisis, as I said before in the other videos, has to do with poverty. The United Kingdom, or even the experts, may tell you something else. But you need to remember that every time the government speaks, or even their experts, perhaps also the media, there is a lot of politics involved in the information they give out. The cost of living crisis is caused by poverty. Rich people do not experience the cost of living crisis at all anywhere in the world, whether in Africa. Africa is well known for poverty as a continent, but there are actually multimillionaires and multi-billionaires in Africa, and they don't suffer the cost of living crisis. So that is the bottom line. If the government actually manages the public sector effectively in the United Kingdom to increase the minimum wage to perhaps £30 an hour, or even £30,000 per annum, after tax and national insurance contribution, net pay for people who work for a living in the United Kingdom, working full-time, getting about 30,000 in net pay as a minimum wage, being provided by employers who are actually mostly private companies. And this can be done by the government by changing policies and practices within the employment sector, within the public sector. One way or the other, the government has to finance welfare policy provision, including the actual setting of the policy, the setup of policy involving in government in the United Kingdom or elsewhere within the political infrastructure, I mean the democratic infrastructure across the globe, particularly in the United Kingdom. It will involve negotiating now between the Conservative Party, who is now the current ruling party, the negotiation between the current Conservative Party in the United Kingdom and the Labour Party, alongside the Liberal Democrats within the national system, but also within the devolved administration of England, Wales, and Scotland, as well as the Northern Ireland on the one and on the other. Britain can negotiate in partnership, working in partnership with the Europeans, Americans, and the Asians and Africa. Because you see, we now live as the world within a globalized countries and continents. So solving one problem in one country will inevitably involve members of the global economic and political system. Society across the globe at national level, at governmental level, must come together to address the issue of the cost of living crisis. The cost of living crisis, if you look at why my discussion of the topic, is essentially a symptom and caused by poverty, caused by an extreme version of capitalism, which is extrematized in favor of the few and against and disfavor of the many, taking wealth away from the many and concentrating this wealth in the hands of the few, which is actually characteristic of a system of excellent rule, an excellent system to promote rule, such as you find with capitalism. Capitalism, in other words, is the best form of growing, creating wealth. For example, the government can create actually support the economy to grow, to grow and produce wealth. Unfortunately, under capitalism, because it is a perfect system designed to prosecute rule in a country, which rule has been historical and also perpetuated by current atmosphere of government and politics in the world, across the globe. especially in Britain. Britain in history and also in contemporary times are actually a global leader in history, having been at one point uh, a leading power as an imperialist power, and in what we found with the British Empire as it occurred then, but also as it actually continues today. Britain being at the apex of global power, especially financial instrumentation involving the city of London, which is actually now one of the most powerful cities, if not the most powerful, to replace even New York, Frankfurt, and all the other financial centers of the globe. So London actually is a powerful country. It's one of the richest. The pound is the strongest currency in the world. And to find poverty, which is actually evidenced by the cost of living crisis in the United Kingdom, is unthinkable. It is a political and social error. It should be corrected by policy involving the public sectoral policy and the governance thereat to provide a service which is actually public and effective. I have argued, in my opinion, rather successfully to suggest that the shutting down of the public sector is occurred in the United Kingdom by the British government, both the Conservative Party and the New Labour, as well as the Liberal Democrats in England and also in Wales, Scotland. There's SNP in Scotland and across, not just in the United Kingdom, but the capitalism in its extremity, which involved the shutting down, the willful, the systemic, the strategic shutting down of the public sector across the globe. As provided the scheme, or rather the ramification involving what is the global agenda, a right-wing political agenda, which actually underpins the global economic system, which is otherwise known as globalization. This is a form, in my opinion, for a type of violence, which the state has consistently orchestrated, which I think is about time now to change our attitude, to learn our cultural economy, comparing our cultural economy with our developmental economy, which is what we have, almost exclusively focusing on our developmental economy, which is actually a good thing because it has actually developmental economy as a component of modern day progress, has provided wealth under capitalism, has promoted technology, science, engineering, which we have seen in our cities and towns, and also across the globe in different countries. Technology is now leading, taking over the running of countries, the driving of the global economy, as we see technology happening, taking jobs away there from the now middle class and eventually the rest of the society. Because as I speak now, the working class at the lower scale of society who work for living are now losing their jobs, and most of them are being redundant now in the United Kingdom, they are depending on the welfare state benefit, which is what I am today talking about, because it is actually within this welfare state benefit that the government is now providing support for the cost of living crisis. The people who are victimized by the cost of living crisis are actually the ones at the bottom of the pile of society. Nearly 30% of the population in the United Kingdom who actually work to be for pay within the minimum wage infrastructure, and also those who are out of work, pensioners, children, and people who might be sick. So people now suffering the most, which the government of the United Kingdom are now sending them in what I can only describe to be concentration camp in public libraries, in public spaces, within probably schools or whatever else, to run away from conditions of poverty, which actually features in lack of accessing, failure to access energy, food, and itself going forward, the societies, the communities in the United Kingdom and perhaps in other countries will begin to face homelessness, per se, given the government failing to provide effectively public sector and the public service accompanying the same, failing to provide the services. Housing has seen the demise of security, the security for the poor who are actually at the bottom of the pile, but also increasingly the middle class would depend mainly on credit to actually feel good about their income. But this is actually temporary, like I said in the other video. Credit economy is quite temporary. Going forward, it's a easing out of the credit for people who are actually in the middle class. Credit is now going to be the preserve of the super rich, at least people who will take credit for investment purposes, who are actually multi-billionaires, and therefore exposing the middle class to poverty, and also technology, which is actually approaching to take away jobs from the middle class of the British residents, citizens and residents. This will actually change the landscape of poverty. It will expose society and actually reveal the truth about poverty in Britain. Because now the middle class has actually provided a cover for governments to argue that poverty actually is less than what it actually is, because at the moment poverty includes actually the middle class, which actually, if calculated accurately within the right formulation, then you'll find that up to 90% of the population of the country are poor, including the middle class, especially the middle class. Because you see, if you live a life of precariousness, then you are actually in a situation of poverty. And take away the credit which actually support food, energy, and all the other factors for the middle class, who actually, to be fair, they aren't fairly enough. Because you see, the more you have, the more you are actually loved by creditors, including banks, including service and product, provision, good and service providers, which is what you now find within the credit economic infrastructure. This will be changing gradually with the machine taking over from the middle class worker, and also beginning to run the economy, which would be a good thing. But because of the economic system, if the government continues to shut down the economy, people who lose their job, the 90% who will lose their jobs, who have to work for a living in the United Kingdom, these will be losing their job to technology in the next 50 to 100 years. Most people in the United Kingdom and across the globe will no longer be working, because technology will be taking over work, will be running the economy, which will be a good thing for the economy and for the prosperity of the United Kingdom, and also the prosperity of the global countries and continents. However, because of the political system of political violence, even if technology will effectively, things like artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, 3D printer, and all the rest, robotics, all these things put together and many more to come will actually improve the robustness of and the capability of technology, which is actually going to be, in terms of development, a major story of success for the United Kingdom, but also for the globe, which actually is supposed to bring to solve the problem of poverty overnight, except for the political violence, which technology is not designed to bring peace. Technology is designed to create wealth. to get us out of poverty, to actually push us into affluence, into wealth, which it will do, in theory, which other people now, people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and the rest of it, are now enjoying the fruit of development. There are multimillionaires and multi-billionaires, and somebody like Elon Musk is measured in hundreds of billions of US dollars. That is a lot of wealth to have for one person, and it is happening, and that is a good thing. Millionaires and billionaires are good in a country if they are there, if they're a sign that the world is actually developing in the right way. Except the problem to do with failure for the rest of the world to access wealth of the world because of the political system, which is actually integrated into the economic system, making the economic system as an instrument of violence, because politics is inherently violent because it involves rule. The central mode of operating societies is something in democracy known as the rule of law. The law is there to oppress, not to liberate. Where there is law, there is oppression. Because the law is there to teach people who break it. To teach people who break the law, it teaches them a lesson by imprisonment or some kind of punishment within the civil infrastructure of the legal system, such as paying fine or even being thrown out of your home. Bailiffs coming to take over of your wealth. You're punished. If you break the law, you're punished. The law, theoretically, is supposed to cease in its existence as soon as the nation, society become enlightened. However, the law, in spite of itself, in spite of its credentials to produce justice and stability, which it does, it also creates a system of violence, as in the civil, political, and economic system. It creates violence because it is actually applied inequitably, in the sense that rich people in power, are actually above the law. They get away with criminality, they get away with illegality. Take, for example, people who actually avoid paying taxes in the United Kingdom, who are multi-millionaires and multi-millionaires, they don't pay taxes, they avoid taxes, and that is construed as being legal. It is just a borderline between evasion and avoidance. Evasion is actually criminal conduct, but if you look at tax evasion and tax avoidance, you will find that it is just a matter of technicality, that the one is actually legalized, which is avoidance, and the other is criminalized, which is evasion, which rich people actually take advantage of it. Tax avoidance, do not pay taxes, and that is a form of evil which is legalized. The law is unhashed, which is actually failure of jurisdiction within law, politics, economics, and all the other elements of society. And all these complexities are interplaying to produce a society of inequality, and also increasingly producing a concentrating power and wealth in the hands of the few, and taking this wealth and power from the hand of the many, power being necessitated in the estate where rule is prioritized over any other factor. So if you see the hierarchy of power, at the top, the idea of stability is actually achieved when the few at the top are actually having power, which is commonsensical if you are to prosecute power in a country like Britain. At the top, there are people having power should be few. And that is why the system is rigged, because it is based on the power infrastructure other than economy or politics. You see, and if it was just economy and politics where there was peace, because rule produce force and produce violence. That's the only way for a group of individuals to rule over other people. The rulers becoming masters, and the rule becoming servants or slaves. And this is actually the current system. Then nothing is going to change that, because people will always be inadequate to produce peace per se. And I have also proposed that we should now, to bring peace, actually look at something called the cultural economy, which is actually the other component of progress as compared or contrasted with the development, which is actually crude in terms of our society, which is actually designed for the few to rule over the many, using wealth as a weapon of rule, like I have described now with violence. Wealth, instead of becoming wealth, instead of being a tool of mass construction, wealth now is the weapon of mass destruction. We see it with the likes of the cost of living crisis. We see it, which I have said, the cost of living crisis, which I have said, is actually a symptom of a broken society, or a symptom of the problem, similar to COVID-19, similar to Brexit, similar to the financial crisis, similar to all the other crises which preceded our time, like the First and the Second World War. We saw that our people suffered, poor people are dying, rich people are actually getting richer, less of the ruling class actually die during a crisis. We see that consistently. Every time there's a crisis, the majority of the poor who are actually slaves, who are ruled over, they are known as citizens, but they are not, because you cannot be citizens if you are under the rule of law. Especially if we see the super rich operating above the law all the time. Look at Donald Trump. If Donald Trump was a poor person, look at Boris Johnson during COVID-19. If he had failed, if Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, the current Prime Minister of Britain, if they had failed to pay if they had paid to pay the penalty for breaching COVID-19 rule, they would have been in prison. They would have had, they have committed a crime which is actually palpable enough for their record to be on the book, and probably would have been arrested and put in prison. Some part of the penalty for COVID-19 breach was as high as £10,000. If a poor person is actually asked to pay £1,000, they would probably certainly go into prison, but a rich person would be able to pay their way out of prison. As simple as that. The same with council tax. Council tax, potentially, if you don't pay council tax in the United Kingdom, you can go to prison. But because of poverty, poor people are potentially every poor person can go to prison in the United Kingdom because of poverty, because of failing to pay council tax, or any other debt associated with maybe inland revenue, things like child tax credit. If you have debt within that regime, child tax credit, working tax credit, you could go to prison for non-payment. And I don't know about ULEZ. If you don't pay ULEZ, if you don't pay congestion charges, leave a comment below. If the consequences of non-payment, you could probably go to prison. So poor people in the United Kingdom could go to because of the law. Talk about the rule of law. Potentially they could go to prison for being poor because they didn't pay their debts, which is actually mandatory, which the government has actually said. Rich people do not have that problem. If you commit a traffic offense, maybe you didn't pay your road tax, that's a criminal offense. If you don't pay, you can be arrested and put in prison, but because you might not have money to pay for not paying road tax on your car, on your vehicle, because you're poor. You could go to prison because you're poor. A rich person breaching breaching in the same offense will pay his or her way out of prison. So you can see this is just a cursory look and why the law is actually intended to oppress the poor, who are the majority, the many, which is actually the slaves, and also to protect the few who are actually the spirit. Today in the United Kingdom, the government has shut down the public sector. If you talk about the law, access to justice for the poor, it fails because the government is now shutting down legal aid for people who are poor, cannot access justice. And alternatively, the rich, the spirit, the 10% who are actually at the apex of society and also swimming in wealth, will access justice. So if you are an employee in the United Kingdom and you are disputing with your employer because of employment law, which, for example, you fail even if you are unfairly dismissed because you haven't worked for 2 years for your employer, that policy is wrong and evil, just to say the least. I know the ruling class, you shouldn't call them really evil at all, because you can get into a serious problem. Potentially, if you say a bad thing about somebody who rules over you, you're looking for trouble, potentially, or in the actual sense. So mind your languages. Thank you to everybody who have subscribed to my channel once more. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and let's carry on with this conversation to see through the prism of the cost of living crisis, to understand the wider situation pertaining in the United Kingdom, and the wider situation pertaining under globalization in the rest of the world. The advantage of globalization is that there is something called harmonization, and also I think something called cooperation between states, but particularly harmonization where capitalism is now being harmonized as an economic and political system, which if you find a situation such as the closure of the public sector in the United Kingdom, rest assured that in an African country, in perhaps a village in Africa, the same is being happened, where now if you go to school, if you go to the hospital, you have to pay privately, and the public service, the public sector closing down in these countries, in continents, are now masking the provision of for public service, which is now in under a system where the government is attempting to impose its will on private companies to provide public service, and thereby creating a catastrophic failure of public service, like we see in the United Kingdom, within the health sector, within the social security benefit sector, within the employment sector. The minimum wage is very low, and actually the fundamental source of poverty in the United Kingdom is the chronic cancer of low pay, and it's actually evidenced by the level, the appalling level of minimum wage. The United Kingdom government has no shame, because if it was, a country of the caliber, with the caliber of the United Kingdom, really, if you are a United Kingdom government and a state, poor people should not be in the United Kingdom at all. There's any sense of shame to those who rule this country, or also probably they're deluded to think people will not see, to think the world will not actually recognize the shame the British government has actually prosecuted over the British people. You see, the failure of citizenship, the failure of integrity, the failure of respect, the failure of culture by the government, which actually abuse public sector. Public sector, the purpose of public sector is actually to mitigate the extreme nature of capitalism, which the government cannot, under any circumstance, close it down. They cannot close the public sector, which they have done, which they have pretended, either because of ignorance or actually downright dishonesty or lying to the British people, to say the private government is the right instrument to provide public sector. Private sector is not created to provide public service, because the private sector under capitalism is focusing on developing the market economic system, which businesses operating under these markets are have as their objective to create wealth and nothing else, and that is what they do. The business entity which cannot produce, we cannot make profit, cannot actually make profit, will be closed down, will fail. And it is only reasonable for private companies to focus as of objective to create wealth, to maximize wealth. So when you hear the government talk about the government or businesses talking about efficiency, they talk about profit maximization, which involve cutting costs. Public service, by its nature, actually is a cost. It creates cost and nothing else. Public sector is not designed to create profit. That's why farmers are subsidized in the UK by the United Kingdom government, so that they are able to produce food for people to access it affordably. The same with education, healthcare, the same with public transport, housing, and all the other infrastructures, including food and energy, alongside water. Every time the government neglects funding the public sector, the public service, either via public sector or private sector, the system fails. When the government talks today of financing the public sector, it's talking about giving money to private companies which are actually multi-billionaires and multi-millionaires infrastructures. These monies are actually used to build capital and to build infrastructure. It is not being used to support policy. Policy is what we get in terms of public service to people who need it at the front line, such as nurses, doctors, beds, ambulance in the hospital. Because these are lacking, there is a chronic failure of the service. You try to book an appointment today with your family doctor, your GP, you don't get it. And when you try to go to accident emergency, you don't actually get served. If you're not careful, you can stay for 2 days at the reception, waiting for somebody to treat you. You will be left to sit there. You call for an ambulance, they will say to you they are not taxis, because they don't have the money. If you are sick, so sick that you should stay in the hospital, you will be brought home, because they cannot keep you there. So expensive, beds are so costly, because government of the United Kingdom have turned the National Health Service into private businesses. Private businesses need to make profit in order to survive. It does not make sense to privatize public sector, private service. The Labour Party, the new Labour, has gone dumb, because they can no longer speak clearly. Since a man known as Tony Blair, former Prime Minister, came and created new levels, the Labour Party died as a champion of public services. So now they stumble. The Labour Party is redundant, because they are doing the same thing the Conservative Party is doing. The Conservative Party is known to cater for the super rich, the so-called supporter of capitalism. Capitalism is there to help the few and not the many. The British people should know this, so that when they go to speak to their MP, they know what they're talking about. Go and do a research, understand the politics, and be your own interpreter. The government should not interpret what it has failed to provide. Should not interpret it for you. You should actually interpret it for yourself. Take responsibility for your life. If your life is cheap, then be quiet. If it is not, learn your culture. and value your life. Value the life of your friends and family. Value the life of the rich and of the poor, so that you can speak truth to power. Take responsibility. It doesn't have to be the 70 million of the United Kingdom population. If you are only two of you, that is enough. Take decision. If you have to meet. Become a government in the community, in the family, so that you can start speaking to the government. You start advising your member of parliament about poverty, because you are the one suffering. Peer review board, which advises the United Kingdom government to set the minimum wage or the national minimum wage or the national living wage, they do not know poverty because they themselves don't go through poverty. These are actually the elites, the ruling class of the world. They are irrelevant in advising government how much it should be paid. The people to inform the government about how much they need to be paid are poor people, the citizens of this country, people who vote for the government, the majority, the 90%, the working class, who are actually the middle and the lower class, who understand what it feels to be paid £10,000 in minimum wage, or even £20,000, or even £30,000. If you are being paid £30,000, you have to manage your income, especially now with the death of the public sector, with the death of public service, because prices will be going up to the extent that, in spite of technology, which technology should have actually reduced prices, producing quality products, goods and services, it is not doing for political reason, for ideological reason, which is actually eroticness, which is obsolete, because we no longer are at war with an imaginary enemy. We are now at war with each other. It's a country, it's Britain. We are fighting fellow British. The Russians have gone to sleep. Communism is dead. Capitalism as one is practiced in the East. It is practiced in the West. It's practiced in Africa. Which war are you fighting? Which war are you fighting that you allow the majority of the people to languish in poverty, facing extinction? If we are to talk about extinction, then let us look at the state of inequality, economic and financial inequality. The humanity face extinction because the poor are going to die of poverty first, and the rich will also die of poverty, because poverty involves violence. Violence is blind to humanity. It doesn't see humanity. If you produce violence in society, it is a blind spot. It's a blind entity. It does not, if it sees a human being, rich or poor, violence is blind. It does not recognize people. To avoid killing them, it will kill the poor. It will kill the rich, the poor and the rich. And this is something we need to really understand as people, because you see, the purpose or even the meaning of being human is actually survival. This is the good news. Humans are actually hardwired to survive, and they will. Fortunately, they will. Because you see, this moment we begin to understand what is at stake, then we change from being asleep, because as humanity, as a species, we have gone into a coma, it's form of stupor. We are actually asleep. We have been hypnotized into silence. You see, we into deep and long slumber. We are actually asleep. Once we realize our life, also the life of our children, the life of our fellow humans, of our species at stake, we face extinction because of violence. Then we begin to revisit our cultural roots. which is humanity, our humanity. We begin to visit our humanity, which is our cultural root, to come back to our senses, to stand up for our rights to exist as a species across the globe. Nothing to do with the rich, nothing to do with poor, nothing to do with black or white, whether you are European or African. We are the human family. We are here to live as people so that we can survive. This is actually a call to survival as a species. Violence is threatening our very existence. We are destroying the environment. Our politics is broken. The wealth is wasted, being hoarded, being abused. We are abusing our wealth in the name of madness. The poor are excluded. The majority of the population are excluded. We blame population. We blame society. We have to open our eyes to see where the problem is. The problem is a failure of culture, a failure of society. We have technology, which is enough to lift us out of poverty within a decade. We can do it within 10 years. All we need in Britain now to raise the level of national living wage or national minimum wage, whatever you call it, is the same. It's just you need the level to get from where it is 10,000, which is actually it's a form of madness, a form of insanity. Raise the level to £30, to £30,000 per annum. Net is a net pay. Anybody working in Britain, anybody working full time, should not get less than that, and people should be able to access jobs, full-time jobs. If they don't work full-time, then they should be paid full benefits. The level of benefits, which is the money paid to support people who do not work or who work part-time, this level should be raised in line with the minimum wage, £30,000 per annum, so that any discrepancy, because somebody is working less hours, should be complemented, should be actually topped up by the benefit. This is a system which should be rolled out up and down the country, in Britain, in the United Kingdom, on the one hand, but also in Europe, America, Asia, and Africa. Africa needs to be supported by rich countries, because you see, rich countries, especially Europe, looted Africa during a violent episode of capitalism, of imperialism. They destroyed Africa. That's why Africa is poor. The Europeans, especially the Europeans, and also their allies in America and Asia, are responsible for the poverty of Africa. Africa suffers poverty today fundamentally because of Europe, America, and Asia, especially Europe. So the developed countries who stole wealth, who destroyed Africa by enslaving Africa, should now come together right now and develop Africa. Africa is developing, but the wealth is concentrated in the hands of the few who are actually some of the most dangerous dictators, military dictators in Africa, measured in billions, millions, while the rest of Africa is languishing in poverty. This should stop forthwith. Wealthy countries like Britain, in European countries and American countries, the Asian countries like China and India, and all these other places, Japan, they should raise money piecemeal. They should not give credit to Africa. Foreign aid should not be loans or other form of credit. It should be grants. Africa should be given free money to create a system of welfare in the first place. The second, build capital and infrastructure as well. So the welfare system should operate to remove Africa out of poverty in its entirety. The world is enough, the wealth is abundant. The violence must stop. The culture should prevail. There should be a restoration, cultural, economic restoration in Africa and across the globe, including in the United Kingdom. when I started this process of videoing today, I said what I speak in the United Kingdom actually applies in Africa. I am talking about help available in the United Kingdom to support the cost of living crisis. I've been mentioning these specifics, but I need to also support viewers to understand the wider issue, because you see, we have a choice to actually deal with the symptom and fail to identify the cause. Because you see, if we want to solve these problems once and for all, we need to know why there is the cost of living crisis and how it is being created. And this video and the rest of the video I have produced have been explaining this. And therefore, I will be going forward more and more looking at specific help. And if you watch this video, watch the rest of the video, one point you should take from the other video is that, yes, there is help in the United Kingdom, but it is symbolic, more symbolic than in reality. Because if you ask people who are supposed to get help in the hospitals, supposed to get help in schools, children in Britain are going hungry without food. In a rich country, that is impossible. It should stop today. No child in Britain should go hungry in school. No child in Britain should fail to go to study effectively because the parents cannot afford school uniform. This is not acceptable in the United Kingdom. School uniforms are being provided by private companies, and it is unavoidable. There is supposed to be help given by the government, and this is consistent with the cost of living crisis. It's supposed to be giving help, but this help is fragmented in certain districts, in certain councils. This help, for example, help for school uniforms, are not available from the government, because the government has allowed local authorities to set policies independently, and some local authorities do not implement certain welfare policies. This is wrong. There should be harmonization. Where there are poor people, local authorities should actually implement poverty policies effectively, including providing money for parents who are poor, who are on benefit, who are on low income, including the minimum wage. The minimum wage earners in the United Kingdom should be treated in the same way people on benefit as are treated for purposes of eligibility to accessing benefit. These policies should be clarified and simplified and actually updated and implemented as quickly as possible. Another thing the government needs to do is to finance big charities like Citizen Advice, Shelter, and the whole host of other debt advisory organizations. Some of them are legal companies. They are actually lawyers providing advice on debt, on income, maybe also on finance, financial service, immigration, consumer issues, healthcare, the legal system, the law and the courts system, which is actually may involve things like how to access help, legal help if you are actually being oppressed by your employer. Oppression is a strong word, but it's because the level of power given by the government under capitalism given to employers is now turning employees into slaves. We are going back in time into the story of the Europeans and Americans catching slaves from Africa and also from Europe and America. Don't think only the black people were made slaves. White people were also enslaved. And it is continuing now. We are going because of capitalism, because of extremity, because government, state negligence. Employers have become the new masters. Employees are now becoming the new slaves. If you look at employment law, employers can do anything. They can sack you. They can actually dismiss you for no reason and hire you again. They can terminate your contract. They have the power to terminate your contract and rehire you so that you lose out. to weaken you, because you see they can abuse you as much as they like, and you have no recourse to justice because you don't get legal aid if your employer, even if the even if they actually terminate your employment unjustly, just because of the complexity of the law, which is used now to oppress the poor. And this is something we should pay attention to. This is something I said at the beginning. I'm only, I'm only, scraping at the surface. So what is happening? Watch the rest of the video. Try to figure out what I'm trying to talk about. Because this is actually interesting. This is something we need to really pay attention to. Because if there is help, if there is actually employment issue, if you cannot afford, because the government has shut down legal aid, what are you going to do in terms of employment in the United Kingdom? If your employer is not paying you enough, if they are not paying you your money, the money you owe to them are not really being paid, even if they will say, oh yeah, we didn't pay you, we forgot, we should have paid you, but we forgot. And then when they pay, they only pay 50% of what they should pay you. They don't pay you your salary. If they pay, they don't pay everything. Maybe if you are supposed to be paid £500 after tax, pay £500 per month, you are only paid 300 by your employer. And there is nothing you can do about it. Because, you see, if an employee complains about you, the employer not paying them, the employee can actually terminate their employment, because they have worked for only 1 year. They cannot get support for, they don't have a case for unfair dismissal, which is actually what the government can give legal aid for, unfair dismissal. You see, they don't have a claim. They don't have a case. Even if they have a case, there is no legal aid actually. If my record is correct, there is no legal aid. We have to pay for the dispute. I mean, that is no way to achieve justice for poor people in the country. I want to talk about something really minor, about which involve income, because we are talking about income maximization on this program. It may not sound like it, but I'm talking about income maximization. The information I'm trying to share, I've been trying to share. If you watch the rest of the video, I've been talking about income maximization, which a concept we being used to support people who need actually support during the cost of living crisis. But when you talk about employment, which is the primary source of income, if you're going to maximize income to anyone, employment is the primary source of income maximization, and the rest of the benefit is also there, which will support, complement income. But because of the problem with accessing employment and the quality of work now being provided, the low level of pay has distorted the industry of work actually, which the government should actually help small and medium businesses with grants to support minimum wage, national minimum wage, national living wage, which should be raised to at least £30 an hour or £30,000 net per annum. This is what I say from the top of my head. And almost any working person or somebody on benefit, and benefit also, like I said in the other video, I'm actually trying to repeat some of these points because I already said it in the other video. Benefit should be streamlined. There should be one single benefit being paid, which the government tried to do with universal credit. Well, universal credit actually it was fake because it only actually renamed the rest of the benefit and call it the elements. It's like getting a sack and putting smaller sacks inside a big sack or a big box. Get small boxes of benefit and put it in a big boxes and call it universal credit. It makes accessing benefit harder because you have to wait for your money for 1 month. And during this 1 month, if you do something the government said you should not do, your benefit is going to be cut. So it is actually delaying giving you benefit. And also giving you a lot of conditions. Because you see, there is something called benefit sanction. If you do a slight mistake, your benefit is going to be sanctioned. Sanctioning means your benefit is going to be stopped or suspended. A poor person, that creates a crisis. They may not even be able to go to look for work. They may not be able to pay their rent. The moment you interfere with a poor person's benefit, which is a form of evil, refusing for any reason to pay a poor person their benefit, which is their only source of livelihood, refusing that is evidence of evil in the United Kingdom. This is now happening as a normal situation, and the people of Britain must speak out to their MPs. The people of Britain should never keep quiet. Benefit sanctions should be stopped immediately. Universal credit should be scrapped because it's a very complex system. It is a system which has made the benefit system extremely complicated. It's almost impossible. And if you don't have internet, you cannot actually claim universal credit. And that should stop because so many people actually do not know how to use benefit. So now the government has to spend millions or billions of pounds through private companies or charities to implement something known as help to claim, which is actually a temporary measure. And it does not train claimants to access a computer. It doesn't actually support claimants to access a computer. The level of benefit needs to be raised fast before the government does anything, whether it is universal credit, whether it is something else. Because all the other, for example, working tax credit is now called working element under the universal credit. It gets paid monthly instead of weekly or fortnightly. Poor people have to wait for their money for 1 month, and when you claim universal credit the first time, you have to wait for 5 months, for 5 weeks rather, 5 weeks or 4 weeks. It's paid 4 weekly. For the first claim, you have to wait for 4 weeks, and the government make claimants to get loans. They get loans from the government, which is actually repaid, which make life even more complicated because they are waiting for their benefit. It is a clear sign that the government attitude to benefit is to close it down. And closing this thing down, closing the public sector down, is an ideological move. There is no economic or any social or political merit for closing down the public sector in the first place. The second, closing down the employment sector, closing down the health sector, closing down the schools, actually closing down schools, because privatization means closer or public service. That is what privatization means. Government will tell you something else. You listen to the government if you want to listen. If you are British or resident of Britain, listen to the government who tells you they are doing reform. They are making the government more efficient. Efficiency is a commercial concept, which means cut. Efficiency to make profit. Public sector is not for profit because the people who receive service are actually consumers. You will never be an investor except the government investing. Now, if you transfer that responsibility to the private sector, they will close the economy down. That section of economy known as the public sector will close down because public service does not make profit. The only way to make profit is when the British people are not poor. They are out of poverty. The only way for the public sector to close down is for the government to leave the British government, the British public out of poverty. And the only way to keep them out of poverty is to maintain the public sector, to maintain the government. The government cannot shut down, which is what is doing to shut down in the United Kingdom. And across the globe, we have heard in America, government shut down when the Congress refused to approve funding for public services. So it is actually a global agenda. It is capitalistic, it is violent, it is actually a form of psychopathy, political psychopathy, produced by actually politicians who are totally totally insane. The way politicians now behave in modern Britain and also the rest of the country, it's like they are totally on drugs, like they are drunk, and they are mentally ill. They are psychopaths, totally inhuman. They are probably aliens, and the way these people think is so perverted that humans don't think like that. The level of violence being cooked at Westminster in Britain is the same being cooked in America, in Europe, in Asia, and in Africa. It's global. It has to stop now. The cost of living is the sign of the times. And I have actually been attempting to illustrate what help is given, to explain this help in terms of policy and politics. If you're interested to look at help alone without understanding the complexities, which is my objective actually, to try to explain the system, how it works, how dangerous it is, and what we should do to stop the government, to get enlightenment. We cannot live in the dark. We cannot live in the ages of stone age, where people are actually living in period of prehistory, when enlightenment was so darkened that we knew nothing. The poor have no certificate to be ignorant. The rich have no qualification to be ignorant. Because, see, we live in a society where the poor and the rich are actually ignorant of what is necessary. What is necessary is actually cultural learning and also stopping the war, stopping the violence, because the cost of living is evidence of violence. Closing down the public sector is evidence of violence. And it is a serious topic. If you are a young person or you're a child, you think this is not for you, then think again, because children are being murdered on the street because of the same problem. Because culturally, we are actually gone astray. We allow the government create poverty to frustrate young people, destroy families. Because every time families are destroyed, what you get is actually children are also going astray. Parents, single parentage, especially the single motherhood, is a source of family instability. Children are not happy. Children are actually resentful. They don't listen to their parents because family is broken, has broken down, and we live in a world where there is so much lawlessness. There is disrespect culturally. We do not respect ourselves. We do not respect others, rich or poor. The same, and that's why I began on this video to try to identify the social problem, which is actually I call cultural problem, which is respect and more respect and coming together as respectful adults or respectful young people or children. We are all in it together. We are family. And the moment we begin to open our eyes, learning how to respect one another, not referring to our fellow humans as strangers, which is what we do now in the United Kingdom, which we do in Africa, which we do across all the globe. We call people we don't know strangers, but these are you fellow humans, which means we are actually out of our minds because we have lost the sense of community, the sense of family. We have lost our cultural fingerprinting. We need to get it back soon because this is actually our insurance policy, our passport to peace, our ticket to happiness. Thank you for watching this video. Leave a comment below. We'll see you in the next one, and I will be going through the help given, and I will also continue to pinpoint the problem, the reality associated with what we know as help within the benefit system, employment, and within the schools, within hospital, within the energy sector, food sector, water supply. All these things I will be going through a consumer issue where customers, especially poor customers, are now being abused by traders. Because they can sell you things which are actually defective. They can sell you things. You don't have recourse to justice because you're poor. Even businesses who sells to you call you poor. They don't have no respect for you. And they don't respect people with money. Our culture only respect money. We don't respect people. And this is cultural failure. And if you're poor, if you are rich, do not pretend that you are suffering because of poverty. Yes, you are suffering because of poverty. But rich people are also suffering. They are suffering stress. They are suffering mental illness. They are dying of stroke. They are dying of cancer. Because of cultural failure, because of environmental failure, because of political and policy defects. The poor, the rich are in the same pot. So we are back to basic, but there is hope that we can learn, we can change. And this is why I'm talking, because I live in hope that we as a species can stop and start valuing our life. Learn peace and be happy. There is no point staying alive if you cannot achieve peace. Because to be happy, you have to achieve peace. The purpose of life is actually happiness. Doesn't matter how poor or rich you are. If you're not happy, your life is meaningless. You don't deserve, you don't need even to stay alive. Just disappear, vanish. Until you can see a possibility of being happy. And there can only be happy if we achieve peace. There can only be peace if we achieve our cultural economy. There will be only success within the cultural front if we think differently, if we change the way we think from war to peace. Think peace other than war. If you want to think peace, war, you continue thinking. But remember, there will come a time when you have to reckon with the truth. The truth is that we begin to think peace. We begin to change the way we value humanity. You value yourself, and the way you treat people. This is actually building relationship, improving communications, and also how to develop an attitude of care, which we are losing as a fingerprinting of our humanity. Thank you once more for watching. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't subscribed. See you in the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.